Welcome to the station crew. Enjoy your stay.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Horror Stories from the Internet. Today we are covering the Sonicpasta Sonic's Halloween special. Now this pasta I have been wanting to review since last Halloween when this came out in Halloween 2020. So yeah, what is Sonic's Halloween special? And what may this special Halloween special may contain? Well, sit back and relax as I read and review this creepypasta. A spherical man sat down at his chair in his office, covered in soot and oil grease. He slumped on his right arm on the table that was before him. That was before him. It was the 456th time this year that blasted hedgehog had ruined his plans. It was like a unfair game of ping pong. It didn't matter how many missiles he planted in his machines or how many moons he blew up to make a great laser shooting death planet. That hedgehog foiled his plans over and over again. Ever since he was a little boy, he built machines that often tried to impress his dad, who was too enthralled in his own inventions. He never had time for his little boy, and that Eggman knew that. Then the faithless day arrived. His dad had created the world's fastest life form ever to be conceived, Sonic the Hedgehog. Those words stung his ears like needles. Sonic was an accident. He was never meant to happen. He escaped and made a name for himself around the wilderness. Word got to Sonic that Robotnik was using animals to power his machines, so he did what he has been doing to Eggman for the past several decades. He beat him until he broke. Life was never the same after he came home from playing around the power plant to find his father. The one person in his life he spent the most looking up to and the most to try and impress, hanging from the ceiling like some sort of macabre chandelier. It was the first time in the little egg's life he felt alone. Eggman spent years making the perfect plan to get rid of Sonic, but everyone knows how that went. Eggman occasionally thought to himself in the past why his father decided to do what he did. Now he knew. The fat old engineer was out of ideas. He began to cry in his desolate space of room. His cries grow louder and the single light hanging from the ceiling grows dimmer. What was once a bright light that had filled the room months before, displaying plan after plan, wiped the pest of a blue blur off the planet, was now but only illuminating Eggman and his table full of tears of failure. "I give up! I can't get up anymore!" he wept. "That hedgehog has done it for the last time. My shot just ended. There is nothing left. I swear to God I'll..." But the bulb of light stopped dimming, and so did the vengeful Egg's thoughts of giving up. He remembered once as a child in his dad's library, a book. This book described theories of witchcraft, hell, and the big horned ruler of the underworld himself. He quickly stopped his flashback and thought, "Don't be stupid. You're a scientist, for Christ's sake." A scientist who was out of ideas. and could not explain how to defeat something that was already 10 miles ahead of him, figuratively and literally. When people don't know how to explain things, they usually resort it to religion. Something good happened, if something good happened, it was because God was watching over you. Something bad happened, it's because the devil was looking down upon you. He began to hyperventilate with excitement. His mind was no longer sealed with the knowledge of mechanics and science, but cracked with insanity. If this doesn't work, if this won't work, I don't know what will. He then began to laugh his iconic laugh of evil. Only this time, it would be his last. Welcome home, Sonic. Tails said excitedly. Sonic and Tails had been best friends ever since Sonic found him wandering about in the forest building machines. Him needing a smart sidekick to better combat Robotnik asked Tails to tag along. Tails, being desperate for a friend, giddy obliged. I got a new present for you, Tails. Sonic then revealed behind his back, holding the scraps of one of Eggman's new robot goon. This hunk of junk kept getting on my nerves. He started to do some weird new move I've never seen before. He actually almost got me a few times, like he tried to catch me instead of trying to kill me. Imagine that. Tails opened the door wider for Sonic, closed the door behind him, and began to walk with him to the table where Sonic then plotted the machine. It sure does look weird. I'll have a look at it later. Anyways, how was your day, Sonic? Tails said. And the usual jazz. Eggman build thing go boom. Sonic said casually. Hey, actually, something different did happen. He went away without saying anything. After I destroyed his silly mech, he just up and left, not even screaming in an inaccurate Eggman voice. I'll get you next time. Oh wait. I'll get you next time, Johnny. I'll get you next time, Sonic. Do you think that he's finally given up? Tails asked curiously. Nah, me and that man had been at it for ages. I can tell some part of him actually has fun trying to figure out how to destroy me, Sonic replied. Well, I'm going to go to bed now. See ya, Tails. Sonic said optimistically. Good night, Sonic. Tails mumbled as he was so wrapped up in analyzing the scraps Sonic got for him as a gift. How nice of him, he thought with a sarcastic yet happy smile. I'll figure her out later. Tails said to the pile of junk. He then got up and walked upstairs to brush his teeth and climbed the ladder above Sonic's lower bunk. And with that, the duo fell asleep, dreaming about fantasies, as if on time the hunk of metal began to dimly light up. It began to repair itself enough to be able to do its given function. Catch that hedgehog and bring him to the chamber. It crawled like a spider up the stairs, rested its artificial eyes on the blue blur. Its movements were slow and deliberate, crawling its way to Sonic, not making a peep. It was now looking into Sonic's resting face, unaware of what kind of hell this creature was going to put him through. The mechanic parasite then injected a sleeping agent into Sonic, making him unable to wake up or even feel anything for the next 5 hours. Its back opened to reveal a makeshift cage it made out of the parts it had left and gently picked up Sonic like a mother. Her baby even and ever so delicately placed him in the baby carriage. Sonic awoke with panting breaths and started frantically observing his surroundings. It wasn't some sort of elaborate electrical chamber, he, but just him in a regular steel cage, and crimson colored candles circling him. Sonic then noticed a very vague outline of Eggman. He came ever so slowly, closer and closer to the cold steel cage. Sonic didn't even speak. He couldn't. He had never been in this situation before. Eggman had a maniacally wide smile and was wearing formal attire. Sonic had his back against the cage now, as Eggman began to whisper. Sonic's mind was going crazy. Why was the fat jerk whispering? Why is he in a cage? Why is there candles? What's going to happen to him? Sonic then heard another whisper coming from behind him, quickly turned to see nothing, yet the sound was still coming from there. And then another whisper, and another. Soon all there was were whispers all around Sonic. The sound was like a viper constraining its prey. Just as Sonic was about to scream, it all stopped. He looked around he had his eyes closed and saw nothing. Not the cage, nor the candles. Sonic then felt a heat surrounding him, getting increasingly hotter. It felt like a natural fire, but there was none to be seen. It was getting so hot to the point where Sonic began to sweat. He was afraid he was going to eventually boil alive. Then there was fire everywhere. As if Sonic opened his eyes, Sonic was then shown rapid images in his head. He never saw the creatures in the torment, but it had played out in his brain like if it was. It was subliminal. The last thing Sonic saw was a creature with empty sockets, bleeding with black liquid oozing out, and a snout with lips that curled up way too high for anything natural. Behind those gums were many teeth and fangs. Incisors were growing out of every corner of the gums. The body was the most gruesome. The creature was overweight and had a slit down its belly. Sonic only saw this creature for about 3 seconds in his mind, and then the last second showed long bony fingers coming out of the slit of the belly, pushing away the flesh to make way for a thing he never got to see, but the unholy eyes and straight, perfect, natural white teeth shaping a smile. Tails awoke to the sun shining in his face. "Good morning, Sonic," Tails said groggily, and looked over the edge of the bunk to see Sonic meshing. This didn't surprise Tails, as he usually left before he got up. Though Tails got up more earlier than usual, so there was a little bit of surprise. It soon turned to anxiety as Tails walked downstairs to see the scrap of robot missing from its table. He quickly tried to calm himself, as Sonic would always chide him in a friendly manner for being so scared and anxious all the time. "Don't worry, Tails. There is nothing to fear in this world," he repeated to himself about 3 times. "I'm being so silly. Yeah, it's all really convenient, but maybe Sonic needs to use the table as a footrest or something and move the parts somewhere else, Tails told himself. He took a deep breath, and sat down on the couch that felt oddly cold regarding his theory he conjured a few seconds ago, but decided to be blissfully ignorant. After all, that's what Sonic would do. He got in a comfortable position and turned on the television to watch some cartoons. He watched about 30 minutes or so of his favorite cartoon, one about a bird running away from a coyote who made up overly complicated contraptions to try and catch the bird. Tails always wondered what would happen if the coyote didn't catch the bird. Would he just walk away and find something else to catch, or would he just lie there and give up? He often saw him and Sonic as the bird and Eggman as the coyote and in that sense felt bad for Eggman in some ways. Tails could no longer focus on the cartoon as the back of his mind began to conquer the front of his mind. Where was Sonic? Why did he leave so early? These thoughts rang like a gong going off in his head. Something didn't feel right. Something felt awful. The sun was just barely above the ground. The sky was crimson orange, kind of was a crimson orange kind of color. The air was thick and moist. Sonic stood in the middle of the dark forest, eyes sealed shut, and hands opened with so much force it began to shake. His insides were beginning to contort and shift around, rearranging organs and putting them back. It was as if the body of his it was as if the inside of his body was in zero gravity, except every movement was deliberate and beyond natural. A baby squirrel came hopping around the corner of a rock, looking for some nuts and to store into his tree for winter. Was almost 4 months away. The squirrel was told by his father to collect as many as he could. He was taught well by his dad. He wanted to impress him, so he went deeper and more further away from the tree because that's where he found the biggest and most fresh nuts. He then saw Sonic the Hedgehog. He knew who he was because his dad could never stop talking about him and how he saved him from Dr. Robotnik. He dropped all of his nuts and ran up to the hedgehog, not realizing the odd nature of him and how he was not even breathing. Before the little squirrel got to him, Sonic turned around in the split of a second, as if he was just teleported to face the other direction and kicked the squirrel in the teeth. Sonic's eyes were still closed, and his hands were no longer open wide. Instead, they were in a half-open, half-closed pose, as if he was about to grab something. The squirrel started to cry because 4 of his front teeth were cracked and bleeding. The squirrel hesitantly opened his tear-filled eyes and saw Sonic's leg crouched and getting prepared for a pounce. Sonic opened up his eyes to reveal bloodshot, pupilless eyes and began to bare his needle-like teeth. He then, in the span of a second, jumped at the squirrel before his cries reached maximum volume, even if he was able to cry at an alarming level to essentially send up a flare of for his parents. Sonic's distorted screeching filled the forest, even making a few crows fly out of the branches. Months later, the Sonic was now missing for 5 months now, and the snow was at its peak of about 2 feet. So Tails laid near the fireplace with bags under his eyes with a coffee mug. The phone rang, but Tails ignored it. Ever since Raimi Rose stopped seeing Sonic around, has been calling the house every day. It was annoying Tails. So he, for the first time, rudely ignored it, hoping she won't be one of the people to call again after not picking up. Luckily, she never called back and instead left a voice message. After the first day without Sonic, Tails almost had a heart attack from breathing too quickly. He's been an absolute depressing mess, and so had been Amy. He could tell from every call he had answered, she was sounding more and more hopeless, and this bled into Tails. Only the last few calls sounded a bit weird, but he was so caught up in his own emotions, he could have cared less. Tails, curious as to what she had left in the voicemail because he had nothing else better to do, played the voicemail. "Hey, it's me," she said in a nervous tone. "Tails, I need you to stop by my place." Tails thought to himself, what a joke. The last thing I want to see is my best friend's stalker. He said, following a chug of his coffee. "I think I saw Sonic outside of my window last night." Tails' eyes widened. A beam of hope shot through the thick, cold air into his home. A feeling Tails missed for a while had shot right through him. Tails, now wearing a scarf and a thermal jacket, was walking through the bushes that were blocking the view of Amy's house. He had walked for a few hours because the tornado's propellers were frozen and the entire machine refused to transform into a car or anything for that matter. His heart stopped as he came around the bush to see Amy's two-story house with shattered windows and a door that opened outward to be opened inward. The wood was found to be cracked and chipped around the edges, where the door was supposed to stop from opening outwards. Not caring about who had done it, Tails rushed inside to see if Amy was doing alright. He walked in and immediately threw up. A very vile copper smell filled the house. It stung his nose even after the smell had settled in his nostrils. He looked upstairs to see claw markings around the wallpaper and furniture thrown about. He walked past the stairs because the smell wasn't coming from there. It was coming from the basement. Tails had been to Amy's house about 2 times to pick up some of the stuff she obviously stole from Sonic to add to her shrine. Though he had never been to her basement. Thoughts of what he would find down there began to crawl like a spider into Tails' mind. He made his way to the door and fearfully began to turn the handle, only to be presented with stairs leading down into an abyss. He pulled out a tiny portable flashlight he kept on him and flicked it on. He mainly used it to gaze into the machines he builds while working on them, and because of that light wasn't as strong as a normal flashlight, but just enough to see about a foot ahead. The copper smell was now to a degree of unbearable, yet Tails' curiosity gripped him by the mental hand and dragged him forward. With shaking hands, he reached for the knob of the door and turned it in with a dangerous curiosity. The horrid smell had now essentially smacked Tails in the face and efficiently made him throw up to the side. Amy's basement was ridiculously large for her small two-story house. His piss-poor excuse for a flashlight could only get him to see about a foot ahead by pointing it at the ground. It was dark, really dark. With that in mind, Tails figured to himself that there must be a light switch somewhere and felt around the wall, but not daring to fully step into the room. All of the sudden, Tails' hand stopped reacting to the friction of the cold concrete walls and began to slip as if he touched something wet and sticky. Tails lowered his hand onto the flashlight to see a dark brown red substance. Tails began to feel nothing. He didn't know how to react, for his brain was now going haywire, telling him to experience multiple contradicting emotions at once. He stood there looking at his hand for what felt like hours. He had never seen blood in his entire life before, aside from scraping his finger on sharp metal before. But that was different. This blood wasn't fresh. It was saturated, dry, and old. Tails slowly but casually closed the door, walked up the stairs from what might as well have been a demo of hell, and dragged his feet out of the house and back to his house. All while still staring at his hand, he eventually got back to his place and sat down inside. He was so empty of all feeling, he didn't even take off his jacket, scarf, and gloves, even though they reeked of death. Time drifted on a few hours, and the sun had vanished, and the moon had taken its place. The house was now dead. Tails snapped out of it as he heard snow quickly moving around, being kicked up and thrown about. He bolted up to the window to see random tracks encircling his house. His heartbeat increased in intervals. He couldn't possibly fathom from his 13-year-old brain what it was. The only thing he could think was whatever happens at Amy's house possibly followed him back to his. Tails looked around and stopped investigating the tracks. A dark blue color was seen out of the corner of his eye, but as soon as he flicked his head to the direction of the color, it disappeared. He looked back inside the house that had now filled with a very light moonlight, and he tried to scout a weapon of some sorts, just in case. More sounds of snow being thrown around. Tails jerked his head to the window and saw Sonic, about 30 feet, looking in some random direction. His heart stopped. He had not seen his friend in what felt like several years, yet it had only been a few months. Despite being soulmates, he didn't call out to Sonic. He didn't know why he didn't. His body just told him no. He gripped the edge of the window as he stared at his long-lost friend. Tails turned around to continue searching for a weapon, only to have his attention back to the window as he heard the sound of snow again. Sonic was closer, about 10 feet away. Still looking at the same direction, Tails turned to try and see what his companion was looking at. But he saw, like what happens in Amy's basement, he didn't know how to react. He saw a large building of black where Eggman's base used to be. It was in the same outline as his base, but all of the fancy lights were assuringly turned off. More shifting of snow was heard, and Sonic was now looking at Tails, about 8 feet, with pupils that stared at him, yet they shifted around rapidly and almost aggressively, like his eye was having a seizure. Tails ran away from the window and grabbed the screwdriver he had been eyeing on his coffee table and took a chair and propped it up on the door. He began to cry. Something was happening. Something Tails in his 13-year-old mind could never comprehend. Despite being intelligent and well-rounded, Tails was still a child. He ran upstairs, tightly gripping the screwdriver, and lifted the window just in case he reminded himself of what happened at Amy's house. Her windows were busted open, and glass was on the outside, meaning she probably tried to escape there, but was too late. He began to hear a horrid sound of scratching outside of his front door. Tails openly sobbed. He never saw what happened to Amy, but he knew whatever it was going to happen to him too. And the blood was still on his gloves. He still reminded him that whatever will happen, it's not going to be good. The door suddenly got kicked down with a loud smash as the cracking of wood and the door being knocked off its hinges filled the room and echoed for a while until it filled with footsteps. Sonic then slowly peered from down the stairs, looking forward. His body cracked to look at Tails, and his head slowly cracked to look at him with empty eyes. He had no more pupils. Instead, he had bloodshot white eyes. He tilted his head as if he was curious, and his mouth opened, showing Tails' his bright white smile. His teeth then slowly blackened as they began to drool black liquid from his mouth. Tails' body shook, and he jumped out of the window and started propelling his tails to help him fly. He turned around to see Sonic looking at Tails from the window with his jaw, as his jaw began to unhinge and the flesh around it start to tear off. His hands and limbs grew bigger while the skin around them began to tear as well, at the tip of his fingers sprouted sharpened bone, and Tails whipped his tail head forward, and his face was now frozen in fear and tears. He saw something no child, no man should have seen. His nose was runny, and there was snot covering his fur below his nose because of the cold. It also started to freeze. He didn't know where else to go, so he flew his way to Eggman's factory. He began to get tired, so he cautiously took a break in the snow and turned to look back at his house to make sure Sonic wasn't following him. He repeated this several times until he got to the blackened city. The place was in ruins. It looked like it had been shut down for months. Because the lack of power and streets were filled with robots fallen over and frozen, they looked like they couldn't move. Even if they wanted to do, even if they wanted to do that, is if they had the power to do so. Tails made his way to the center and frantically started looking for a sign of life, because he knew Sonic would be upon him soon if he hadn't reached him already. He saw doors opened to a tower beckoning him to walk in. He ran inside and closed the door shut. Tails had no idea how long he had left to live, so he bolted through the hallway, going through every open door. The path of doors eventually led him to a dark room. There were candles lit everywhere, and Eggman, he hung from the ceiling, his body facing the opposite direction. His body slowly spun around to reveal that Eggman's stomach had been exploded outwards, like something came out of him. Tails spun around to the empty hallway. He had heard loud, heavy footsteps. It didn't sounded like Sonic's, but instead the footsteps of a bloodthirsty creature. What looked like Sonic finally peered its head around the corner, its eyes bloodshot and mouth full of jagged, cracked teeth. His jaw unhinged so much that the skin on the bottom of his mouth fell off, revealing bone. The thing then moved forward sluggishly, revealing a long neck holding Sonic's head that stretched Sonic's original neck out to where it ripped. The body came into view, showing elongated limbs, the skin around the joints almost ripping. The creature came howling towards him. Tails couldn't move out of shock and fear, so he let the creature tackle him, making him drop his screwdriver he once held. They rolled onto each other, and the creature started to beat and scratch at Tails' face. Tails was crying in pain as his skin was being torn by the sharpened bone and being bruised by the bare knuckle punches. He couldn't move. The pain was getting worse. Tails tried to reach for the screwdriver, but the creature slammed its fist onto Tails' open hand, crushing the small bones within. Just as Tails was about to give up, he saw a candle lying beside him. He swiftly grabbed it and returned a slam to the side of the creature's face, lighting a side of it on fire. For some reason, its black liquid was flammable. This made the creature fall back in pain. There was hope now in Tails' eyes. It can be hurt. It's mortal, he said to himself. He grabbed the screwdriver and ran at the creature before getting backhanded out of the way as the creature turned around. Its face has now burnt, and part of the eye began to swell as if it was going to pop. Tails recovered, so did the creature. They both stared at it with intensity, the creature hissing and wiping the black liquid from its face, so it won't catch fire as easily next time. And Tails baring his teeth in rage, he had never felt this feeling before in his entire life. It was pure primal rage. All of the anger Tails had felt was now free, no longer bottled up. It was fight or die. No more running away. Tails saw another candle at his side and kicked it at the creature as a distraction. As he ran up and tackled it, stabbing it several times in the body, neck, and head. Tails was getting equally mauled by the creature's knife-like fingers, but he didn't care. The creature's head back and launched forward to bite Tails in the neck. This made Tails scream and recoil. The creature shoved Tails back on his butt and went for another pounce, but Tails reeled back his legs and kicked forward as the creature landed on him, effectively pushing it back. The creature landed on a candle, and due to it being covered in black liquid, it caught on fire. Its body was now a thrashing pile of screaming flame. It let out one last cry of pain before it fell back slumped and dead. Tails applied pressure to its neck with all of his might to try and stop the bleeding. He looked around him and saw cult-like drawings, books with pentagrams open, and many other drawings. He then looked back at the hellish fiend with utmost disgust and then spat on it with a blood-mixed saliva spit. He grabbed a snuffed-out candle, walked over to the corpse of hell itself still burning, lit the candle, and threw it at the books and papers, lighting them ablaze. Tails stumbled out of the building and tightened his scarf around his neck. It was over, but in the process, Tails was left broken. He had nobody to turn to, except for himself. Tails didn't need anybody anymore. He was now a man. Friends questioned him what happened on that day, after the forest was found to have a pile of dead animal bodies. Amy found her body ripped in half and organs strung about, blood splattering all over her equipment, saved for when she have the lucky moment with Sonic. When he drank the wrong drink and passed out. When the threat of Eggman's regime fell because the entire factory lit ablaze, Sonic now nowhere to be seen, and the obvious injuries across his body and face, he never responded to them. If people knew what had really happened, it would mean the end of all innocence. Tails privately decided to take one for the team and just settle down and enjoy what he had left in life. It's best we all move on. That's what he ended up saying when one of his old friends asked many years later. Okay, now that was Sonic's Halloween special. For my thoughts on this, I will have to say it was kind of pretty decent, but it has many flaws, like the grammar issues and other stuff, and what the hell was with the whole entire weird fucked up implications about Amy Rose being a rapist-ish stalker and shit. There was no need for that to be a part of the pasta itself, in my opinion. I can only assume it was added by the creator because of their extreme hatred of that character. Why? Like, honestly, there was no need for this interpretation of Amy and those implications of Amy in the story to be added in the story. I know I kind of sound like I'm repeating myself, but honestly, yeah, there was no need for that interpretation of Amy and implications of Amy to be in this story in the first place. We already had, like, what the story was mainly going for, like the whole entire thing with Eggman and stuff. And in my honest opinion, I gotta have to say, with how that was added in, it was more so it was more so seems like it was literally added in just for shock value at the end and shit. And I really kind of don't like that, how it just added it there for shock value, just over time for literal shock value to be revealed at the end after it's been revealed that Amy died. It was like implied she had plans to basically like rape Sonic and shit. And like, seriously, it was honestly just tasteless, and honestly just was no need for that to be added into the story at all. It was just tasteless and had no point to it whatsoever of adding to the pasta, of literally just being added for as additional shock value. It already had the thing with like the whole entire thing with like Eggman having Sonic be like possessed by a demon and shit, and I already liked how it went for on that with that in the story. But anyways, for the rest of the story though, I will say that it was kind of decent. It was a kind of decent read. I really loved the whole thing with the main part of this pasta, where for the 456th time Eggman was defeated. Eggman then gives into insanity and uses a satanic ritual in order to finally win against Sonic. Like, seriously, all it took for Eggman to win in this story's universe was for him to go insane and have Sonic be possessed by a powerful mortal demon. And that while lead led to Eggman's own death, he at least got to die knowing he had won. Like, I kind of like this dark interpretation that this story goes for Sonic and Eggman's rivalry and stuff, but honestly, quite a decent read. But considering how flawed this story is, I prefer DJ Sprout's The Black Figure over Sonic's Halloween Special by I Snip Sharpies anytime. Yeah, that was all for this episode of Horror Stories from the Internet. If you got any more creepypastas or horror stories of any kind I should review next and check out, let me know in the comments below, and what do you all think of this creepypasta. Anyways, I'm Wonder Hellblazer, and I'll see you all next time in the next episodes.